People always say I'm quiet. I don't talk much at parties. I prefer rivers over roads, books over crowds, and silence over small talk. I work at a small veterinary clinic on the edge of town, not far from the place where this story happened. A wide, winding river that splits the old sycamore woods in two. That river, to most folks around here, is just scenery, a backdrop for wedding photos or a place to take the kids on warm Saturdays. But to me, it's always been more than water. It's a reminder of how fast life can change, of how sometimes you have to run toward danger, not away. It was late June, the kind of summer afternoon that makes everything slow down. I had just finished a double shift and stopped by the river trail to clear my head. I remember I was tired, the bone-deep kind. I had no plans, just a bench, a breeze, and the sound of birdsong, and then I heard it. At first it was just laughter. Kids, maybe 5 or 6 of them, playing at the edge of the water where the old rope swing hangs from the oak. I smiled. It reminded me of my brother and me when we were small. But the mood shifted fast. One moment, joy. The next, chaos. I heard a scream, high, sharp, panicked. Then splashing, struggling. I dropped my iced tea. My heart knew before my head did. I ran faster than I thought my legs could carry me. The tall grass scraped my ankles. Tree branches clawed at my arms. I remember the sky, so blue, so serene, as if mocking the panic that had suddenly taken hold of my chest. When I reached the edge of the clearing, my breath caught. 3 kids were already in the water. One was clinging to the rope, legs flailing. Another was on the bank, screaming for help, pointing frantically. But the third, a boy, no older than 10, was slipping under the current. I didn't yell. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and jumped. The water was colder than I expected, muddy, strong, unforgiving. It pulled at me immediately, dragging my body like a toy in its current. But I swam harder. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. I saw his hand first, just his hand reaching up. That's when something inside me broke open. A surge of strength I didn't know I had. I caught him. He was limp, coughing, eyes wide with fear. I wrapped my arm around his chest and kicked hard toward shore. The current fought me the whole way. There was a moment I wasn't sure we'd make it. My own head went under once, maybe twice, but I held on. For him, for the screaming boy still waiting on the shore, for the quiet girl whose voice had never been loud, but was suddenly enough. When I finally dragged him out, I collapsed next to him in the mud, soaked to the bone, lungs heaving. He was crying, but he was breathing. That was all that mattered. The other kids surrounded us, all wet, all terrified. One of the girls, no more than 7, looked at me and whispered, "I thought you were an angel." I laughed, coughed, then whispered back, "No, just someone who saw you." People started showing up not long after. First, a jogger called 911. Then a couple walking their dog came with towels. An off-duty firefighter helped check the kids. Paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. But by then, the boy I'd pulled out was sitting up, wrapped in a flannel blanket, shivering, but alive. I stood off to the side, drenched, shaking, hair plastered to my cheeks, watching it all unfold like I wasn't part of it. Like I had been a bystander, but the truth was, I wasn't. I had jumped. I remember one of the paramedics asking me for my name. I hesitated. "Emma," I said quietly. "Emily." She smiled at me kindly and said, "You just saved a life, Emma." I shrugged. My teeth were still chattering. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt cold, shaken, grateful. That boy, his name was Micah, could have been gone. If I had sat 5 minutes longer on that bench, if I'd waited for someone else, if I'd been scared, but I wasn't. Or maybe I was, but I moved anyway. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I regretted anything, but because the image of that small hand reaching out kept replaying in my mind, over and over. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. A reporter, local news. Someone had filmed part of the rescue from the trail above and posted it online. It had already been shared thousands of times. The headline read, "Quiet vet tech leaps into river to save child." I didn't answer the door. I didn't want the attention. I didn't need applause. I just needed to sit with what had happened, to process what it meant. Because when you grow up like I did, unnoticed, soft-spoken, always in the background, you don't expect to be remembered. But that river, that day, it reminded me, sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who run fastest. And sometimes, just showing up is the bravest thing of all. I wish I could say life went back to normal, but it didn't. The video of the rescue made its way across state lines. By the end of the week, my inbox was overflowing. Interviews, local papers, podcasts, even a national morning show. They all wanted to talk to the brave young woman who risked her life to save a stranger. I didn't reply to any of them, not because I wasn't honored, but because something inside me still needed quiet. I'd spent so many years tucked behind other people's stories. I wasn't ready to become the headline in one. Still, word got around. At the clinic, clients started lingering longer. Some would hug me, some just said thank you without explaining why. I'd nod and smile. My coworkers put up a handwritten sign on the front desk. Ask Emma about animals, not the river. She'll appreciate that. I did. But the part that broke me the most? Micah's mom. She showed up one afternoon with her son clinging to her hip like a koala. She was shaking when she spoke. Her voice cracked as she said, "I watched the video. I can't believe that you..." She couldn't finish. So I hugged her. A real hug. The kind that says, "I don't have the words either, but we survived." Micah whispered in my ear, "I drew you something." It was a crayon picture. Stick figures and wavy blue lines. Me with my short ponytail pulling him out of what he labeled the monster river. I cried in the break room after they left. Not because I was sad, but because someone remembered me, saw me, drew me into their life with color and care. That night, I sat by the river again. This time, not alone. I brought the drawing. I brought a journal. And I brought a question, why did I jump? It wasn't just instinct. It was that voice in me, the one I'd ignored for too long, finally yelling loud enough to break through fear. The voice that said, "You've always been brave. You just never had the proof." Now I did. Weeks passed. The media wave slowed, but the impact didn't. People still left flowers outside the clinic. A stranger mailed me a necklace with a silver river pendant. One day, a high school student stopped me on the sidewalk and asked, "How did you know what to do?" I didn't, but I told her the truth. I didn't need to know. I just needed to care enough to move. She smiled and said, "I want to be like that." That moment stayed with me, because maybe that's what courage really is. Not dramatic speeches, not medals or headlines, but being seen and helping others see themselves as capable of more. A few days later, I got an email from the town's youth center. They were planning a summer seminar about quiet strength, stories of bravery that didn't come from sirens or uniforms. They asked if I'd come speak. My hands trembled on the keyboard. I almost declined. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't polished. I didn't even finish college. What could I possibly say? But then I thought about that boy's hand in the water and how that didn't wait for the perfect words. So I said yes. The day of the talk, I stood behind a wooden podium in a sunlit room full of teenagers. My knees wobbled. My voice cracked. But I told them everything. I told them about the river, about the fear, about the choice, and about how bravery isn't loud, it's showing up anyway. At the end, there was silence, then applause, then a line of kids who wanted to hug me. One girl whispered through tears, "I thought being quiet meant I'd never be enough. But you showed me I can still matter." That moment, that was louder than any headline. That was the day I finally understood what the river had given me. Not just a reason to jump, but a reason to keep standing. If I could go back to that moment, right before the scream, to that quiet bench, the sound of the breeze in the trees, to the version of me who thought she was just background noise, I'd whisper something. Not a warning, not a spoiler, just this. You're about to do something no one expects of you. Not because you trained for it, not because you want praise, but because your heart refuses to stay still when others are sinking. That's who you've always been. You just forgot. That day by the river didn't make me brave. It revealed that I already was. It reminded me that power doesn't always come with a stage or spotlight or perfect hair and confidence. Sometimes it comes barefoot, soaking wet, shaking, but unrelenting. Sometimes it sounds like a soft voice saying, "I'll go, I'll do it." And sometimes the people who think they're invisible end up saving lives. I didn't jump into that river to become someone. I jumped because I already was someone. I just hadn't seen her clearly yet. Now every time I walk past that old oak tree where the rope still swings, I stop and breathe deep. And I say, "You did good," because she, the girl on the bench, the quiet vet tech, the nobody in the background, she mattered. She matters, and I will spend the rest of my life living like I remember that.